Paranormal Dreams and Experiences, Episode 1. Hell Truck, September 2024. The person I had this dream about lives next door to a mortuary. When I had this dream, I spent a night at their house. I had a dream I was trying to help a man that I didn't know escape something that was chasing him. In the dream, the man was very afraid for his life. He had done something very bad, but I didn't know what exactly he did. However, I wanted to protect him, or help him escape whatever was chasing him. What I didn't know was that what was chasing him wasn't human, until it got closer to us. Suddenly, I saw a very angry 18-wheeler that was made of white fire. Its wheels were made of fiery flames. I was so afraid for this man. The truck itself was like a phantom. It was angry and ready to get this man. No matter how much I tried to protect this man from the truck gained its power and speed and got closer to him. Finally, I could no longer help the man, and the truck swallowed him whole. The man disappeared right before my eyes. I then woke up. My impression was that the man died by way of the phantom truck. Shortly after this dream, I learned that this same person in my immediate circle has had very bad luck driving a semi-truck. I also found out that they have had many near-death experiences while driving, such as the truck brakes catching on fire, the back wheel falling off of the truck and falling asleep at the wheel. This person has also gotten into a few accidents in this truck. To make matters worse, I found out a horrible secret about this person, and now I am convinced that if they don't change their direction in life, the phantom truck will catch them one day. April 3rd, 2024, and Sadie Robinson and many others, I had a terrifying dream. One evening that I will never forget. I had a dream that I was trying to help a woman whose boyfriend was trying to kill her with an axe. I had my dog in the dream and tried to defend her against this attacker. I remember the room being very dark. I could hear the man running up the stairs. I knew he had an axe, and unfortunately, I was killed in the dream along with my dog. The dream then repeated itself 2 more times. However, on the 3rd time I had the dream, I decided to get my Angel of Death statue that I keep on my altar for protection in real life. My Angel of Death also had a scythe. In the dream, I lit a candle and laid my Angel of Death near the front of the stairway where the man was running towards me and the woman with the axe. Suddenly, the Angel of Death's scythe began spinning rapidly. Then, the dream changed to where I saw a number of prominent men that were police officers, doctors, lawyers, and firefighters. Some of the men were also a part of fraternities like Omega Psi Phi. It was nighttime, and they began dancing in the streets, celebrating that no one knew of the murders they had committed against both women and men they were in relationships with. All of the murders centered around victims that were murdered with a knife or an axe. Then I woke up. I knew this dream symbolized many victims that have died of domestic violence and how their murderers were still running around free. I also knew that the shadow of death was upon them, that although they think no one knows what they have done, the Angel of Death knows and is coming for them either now or in the afterlife. After I woke up from this dream, I heard later that day about the dismemberment of Sadie Robinson and how her torso was discovered. I truly believe that I dreamed of Sadie Robinson's murder and the murder of other victims. I also know that it feels like being hunted down with an axe or knife and the sheer terror that awaits its victims. Death of Money Dream, December 2023. I had a terrifying dream that I kept waking up inside of this room. The The room looked old, like from the 1920s. There was an old lamp, an old table and an old bed. I kept leaving my house but would end up right back inside of it. I remember seeing these old dollar bills on the table and they kept falling. I saw a man inside of the house with me. I didn't know him. He seemed like some sort of guardian or someone that was trying to protect me from something. I began to feel trapped inside of the house. I kept falling asleep, waking up, and walking outside only to enter back inside of the room. The one thing I kept noticing was my lamp. It kept cutting on each time I ended back inside of the room. I finally asked the man what was happening to me. He told me that I was dead. I didn't believe him. He said, "Well, watch what happens, and you will know I'm telling the truth when you see the lamp cut on." So I went back to sleep, and the whole scenario repeated itself again. Then I realized that I was indeed trapped inside of the house. I was a ghost, and the reason I was trapped was due to my obsession over money. Therefore, I was spiritually dead because of it. I realized that I had to change the way I viewed money, and to obsess over it could cause a downfall in my spiritual journey. I also gained insight into what it feels like to be a ghost, trapped inside a house due to a strong connection over money. The 12 black beings in the cave. I had a dream that a friend of mine let me borrow her car. In real life, this friend isn't really a true friend and doesn't wish the best intentions for me in her heart. It was a black sports car. As soon as I sat inside of her car, it began to spin out of control. I saw a triangle compass with my friend's face on it, who works for herself in a particular industry. The triangle began to spin out of control, and so did the car I was driving. The car, on its own, led me to a huge mountain. The mountain had a cave. I got out of the car and went inside the cave. When I did this, I saw 12 tall beings dressed in black. They were at least 12 to 16 feet tall. They were not human. They wore black cloaks with hoods. They had no face, just blackness inside of the hood that stretched into eternity. The mouth of the cave suddenly closed and I could not get out. There was one being in particular that told me how I could get out of the cave and that I was to sing from my heart. I didn't understand how to do this, but I knew this was the only way out. So I began to sing. The being told me I really needed to sing like I meant it from my soul. I then began to sing like I had never sang before. The mouth of the cave began to crumble and fall. I was finally released from the cave. In real life, I have been avoiding the call to use my voice to share with others because of rejection on social media. I enjoy singing and writing. If I do not fulfill my mission here on earth, there will be consequences. This is why I am writing out my dreams. Although they may seem unreal, they are real in my life and a portal and gateway into an unknown realm. I am here to help teach you about new worlds and unknown territories in order to strengthen your souls for your next journey. More importantly, so that we as humans can make the world a better and safer place before it is too late. The Haunted Mall. Experienced October, December 2022. I used to have a store inside of the Aurora Mall in Aurora, Colorado. I also had a kitchen that was located in the basement of the mall. In order to get to the kitchen, you had to go through these back doors and hallways behind the mall that were set up like a maze once you walked inside. There were other doors and hallways you had to walk through in order to reach my kitchen. There were nights I worked very late into the evening and would not leave until 3 a.m. I would often have to go get items inside of my store that was located on the second level. I would never see anyone besides me inside of the mall. I knew security was somewhere, but where? I would often ask myself. Whenever I would walk past the clothing stores, I would become most frightened at the stiff mannequins that seemed to watch me each time I walked by. There were dozens and dozens of them as I would walk through the mall, racing to get back to my store. I would feel their life like eyes watching me, and I dared not stare back for too long in fear I would see more than what I bargained for. One evening, when I was walking back to my store to grab more materials, I heard a child laughing. This sent chills up my spine. At first, I thought it was the recording of a song that played on a carousel ride near the arcade. However, the laughter wasn't coming from that direction. At this point, I decided it was time to go home. Another night, I decided to work late. I always felt terrified even getting to my kitchen because there were so many hallways that hid behind the mall that I thought, what if something happened to me? Who would hear me? Better yet, what if I heard something like footsteps or movement in one of the other rooms? What on earth would I do, knowing no one was in them? I would play YouTube movies to tune out these thoughts. This mall had several deaths that occurred inside of it, such as shootings. I could not help but to wonder how haunted this mall really was, and why I even working in such a place at all hours of the night. Strangely enough, I had and still have a spirit animal that is a hawk. When I worked at night, my hawk and her mate would sit perched near the mall sign. They would wait for me to leave and go home. I felt my hawk was trying to tell me something. Shortly after this, my hawk appeared on my 7th floor balcony of my home one early morning. She sort of looked at me as if she were warning me about something. About a week after this, I continued working at the mall in the evening. This crazy woman began banging on the mall doors and acting irate and violent. I called for security, and a 75-year-old man's security guard came, and it shocked me because I knew he was defenseless and could not do very much. I felt afraid, and that is when I literally saw my hawk fly away and never return to the mall. She is still with me, just so you know, but she wasn't going back to that mall. So now I felt even more vulnerable, as though something bad was looming in the air and that I needed to leave the mall and abandon my store altogether. One evening, I felt like I wasn't alone, and that there was something watching me. I decided to call security, and an older woman came towards my store. I asked her where the rest of the team was, and she told me that she was the only one that worked nights, or that they would just have one guard for the entire mall working in the evenings. I told her that I felt like the mall was haunted. She replied, "It is haunted." I tell them that all is well and to settle down. I asked her, "What do you mean them?" She replied, "Why, the ghost, of course. They're everywhere in this mall. Sometimes they pull my clothes, whisper in my ear, and I can hear them running around." I couldn't believe my ears. I told her that I felt like I was being watched and that I was very afraid to be there. She told me to just come and work during mall hours and that it wouldn't be so bad. That is exactly what I did. About 2 weeks later, my next door neighbor was robbed at gunpoint in one of the hallways behind the stores after hours. I decided that after too many red flags and the vacant feeling I felt every time I entered the mall, it was probably not the best place for my business, and terminated the lease without a penalty. Walking through cemetery with my son. July 2005. I used to work late at night in Philadelphia at the first Qdoba restaurant that launched in the city. My son was not even 1 year old at the time. I lived outside of Center City and lived in Northeast Philadelphia. My first night traveling to my new duplex across town was gut-wrenchingly frightening. The truth was, I was so afraid because I didn't really know how to get around this part of the city, especially by public transportation. My shift ended at 12 a.m., and I waited for the babysitter to meet me near the subway station. I had hoped she would be so kind as to take me home, but that was unrealistic of me to think this, as I was so naive, being from a small city. Now a huge city called Denver. My stomach began to turn violently as I rode the subway with my baby boy, who was tightly bundled in his mega stroller. I got off the subway and then waited for the number 12 bus to pick us up. I was very afraid as I saw strange people, an unfamiliar place at the bus depot. The bus driver came to the depot to pick up all the passengers. He also helped me onto the bus with my stroller. I asked him to tell me when to get off on my stop. My heart was racing as it was now 1:14 a.m. in the morning, and I felt like I would be lost in the darkness. I began to pray for help as I got off the bus with my son's stroller. I felt a very uneasy feeling because the directions didn't make any sense. There was another man that got off on the same stop. As I began walking down the quiet street, there were no homes. There were only small hills and dim lights. I asked myself, where am I? I felt like I was going the wrong direction. I continued walking, and my heart began to pound violently. The environment looked eerie and cold. I started praying harder to find my way back to my home. Suddenly, I heard a man's voice calling me, "Miss, miss." His voice seemed to be getting closer. I turned around and looked at the man running towards me. It was the man that got off on the same stop as me. "Miss, are you okay? Where are you walking to? Do you know where you're going?" I didn't feel afraid of this man, but I was relieved. "Actually, I am lost." "Well, Mom, I am not trying to scare you, or nothing like that, but where you are now is a cemetery. It's an old cemetery, and you are walking the wrong way. You didn't hear about the serial rapist and killer that is out here. This is the area he's supposed to be in. Come on, let me help you get home." "Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. You're an angel." I don't know what I would have done. The man was about my age, maybe a little older, and was Latino. I told him my address and he walked me all the way home. My son was asleep and had no idea what was happening. From that moment, I never walked alone again at night, and had a male friend of mine meet me at the bus stop and walk me home. Moral of the story: if you have a child, don't try to raise them on your own in a new city, as you are putting yourselves in danger. At the time, I wasn't really communicating with my family and was trying to find my way through life. However, this was a wake-up call to rethink my steps. Shadows of a Shady Man, Experience February 2025. Have you ever thought you knew someone but were far from this truth? I began to have doubts about a man that I loved, and if he were really in my corner from day one. I felt there were so many signs that pointed out that the man may be battling demons with his sexuality, as well as hiding money from me. I began praying and asking for signs to know where this man's heart truly was. The man in question, although acts to be a spiritual man, harbors very dark thoughts about other people. I learned over time that he had been lying to people and that he is very manipulative. He also stays up all night contemplating how he will manipulate others. One particular night, he really wanted me to come and see him. I really didn't want to, and had a bad feeling about him and his motives. Instead, I decided to rest and go to sleep. My son was out of town, and it was just me in the house. Typically, I sleep with a small light on due to an innate fear of sleep paralysis. But on this one particular night, I decided to turn off all the lights. I woke up around 2 a.m. but felt my body going into sleep paralysis. I couldn't move. It was as if I were having an out-of-body experience, and that is exactly what began to happen. I could see myself trying to move on my bed but couldn't. When I tried moving, I felt like there was a man behind my bed. The way my bed is positioned, I do not have headboard, and my bed sits in the middle of my room. The bed frame is electronic and it can move up and down. In the sleep paralysis state, the top of my bed was elevated where my head rested at least 4 feet. When I tried moving to turn around to see behind my bed, I could see that man was hiding and ducking and dodging me behind my back and into the darkness behind my bed. His forehead was sweating and he was really trying to hide from me. I could see his body moving around as if he were doing a bunch of stuff behind my back. Finally, I realized who the man was. It was my lover. I called out his name and he ducked again behind my bed. The dream changed to me being able to stand up in my room next to my bed. My lover then runs up behind my back, but my body was stiff. He then ran in place behind my back, pushing me at the same time, but I wouldn't budge. He was trying to make me run in the direction he wanted to go, but I would not move. I then walked through this dimension and saw myself as a 1-year-old baby. I picked myself up, and I was literally looking at myself and holding myself. I began to kiss my cheeks and hold me and love me. I couldn't believe I was looking at myself. Then I remember seeing 2 scrolls that looked like contracts. One contract was laying in front of me, the baby, and the other contract was laying in front of the guy I am describing. I knew that I had 2 contracts to complete, but that my contract with myself was the most important, and the other contract with the man would be complete. These were soul contracts, and something I decided I complete before my soul came on this planet. I then woke up from this dream, sleep paralysis. I was so afraid because of what I experienced from the man hiding from me and showing me his dark side that I didn't realize was there. I was so afraid that I decided to go to his house just as he wanted me to do. Once I arrived, it baffled me that he was up. It was as though he was planning and contemplating how he would deceive me and lie to me. His thoughts were so strong that my spirit guides revealed his true intentions while I was asleep. From this experience, I do not sleep in utter blackness, as I am afraid of what may be revealed. Just so you are aware, this contract has ended with this man, for I discovered that he bisexual and has manipulated me in order to get his green card. He has also lied about his money and he has plenty of it. This person is headed down a path of destruction, and I am so grateful for this frightening experience as it awakened me out of the slumber I was. Lightning strikes, experienced, February 2024. During the time in this relationship with this bad person, the man was out truck driving for his job. I will never forget around this time last year. I was asleep, but woke up the sounds of thunder and lightning. It was so close to me that it alerted me to run over to my window to see what was happening. I felt that the lightning was quaking, and the sky was lit up for extended periods of time. The thunder spoke to me in an enchanted telepathic voice as the lightning began to blow through the clouds. The lightning said, "What are you doing? You are in danger. You need to leave your relationship. The man you are with is not who you think he is. He is lying to you. Get out now. Get out now." As this message began to happen, I decided to video record this happening. After reviewing the footage, I saw ET lights inside of the lightning appear. It was 2 different ships, and they moved incredibly fast and then took off. I felt that there was some sort of higher powers within the clouds trying to warn me, and this wouldn't be the first time I had warned through the clouds. After this happened for a good 15 minutes, it prompted me to begin really doing some research into this person I was. I started searching through our room and found receipts of thousands of dollars he sent back to his family. Meanwhile, he really didn't help me with money and lied and said he didn't have it. I also found some strange sort of lubricant that someone gave him, which really sent off red flags. I already had other issues going on with him, but at this point, the lightning inspired me to move quickly. That summer, I ended up separating from this person permanently. The expiration of time. Dreamed. December 2010. I had a dream that humans only had 48 hours to live. The Earth had emitted a poison into the atmosphere that was lethal to people. The entire city I lived in was frantically running around. The government had taken over and said that children had to be separated from their parents. The children would be the first to die, and they had to be moved downstairs into a basement. I was distraught because my son had been taken away from me and forced into the basement where I would never see him again. There were many people that were unaware that Earth had released this toxic gas. My mother was one of them. I was determined to try and call her to tell her the devastating news, but she would not answer my calls. Since I worked for a well-to-do company, they were moving all of their employees to high-rises so that we could live a little longer. The richer you were, the higher above elevation you could move to, which meant you would live longer. Before I had to move in with my co-workers to the high-rise, I decided to try to call my mother and to look for her. I remember running near this park and calling her. Finally, I got a hold of her. I told her that we only had a few hours to live and that she needed to seek shelter. As I was telling her this, I heard her take her last breath. Then my doom came to me. Since I had smoked cigarettes and also contributed to polluting the earth in different ways, I was not exempt from being taken away from the earth. As I began to run back to try to get into the high-rise, I felt myself taking my last breath, and then I woke up. I realized how important it was to take care of our planet, for you never know when the earth would just get tired of humans and how we have carelessly taken care of our beautiful home. The Burning Churches dreamed, October 2003. I had a dream that there was fire coming from the sky that caused churches to catch on fire. I entered into one of the smoke-filled churches and saw a creature that stood about 3 feet tall. He wore a cloak and resembled a troll. He also had a staff. He had a serious expression on his face. He told me telepathically that churches would begin to burn. Shortly after this dream I had many years ago, more and more churches have been exposed for crimes against children and other terrible acts. There has also been accounts of churches catching on fire. This is both symbolic and a foreshadow of the state of this institution. The boy and his dog dreamed. August 1992. I had a dream that there was a young boy around the age of 6 that had a cute black lab dog. The young boy was often left alone for long periods of time in the evening, while his mother worked late as a waitress inside of a diner. There was a man that was a truck driver around the age of 27. He had a thick brown beard, a large belly, and smelly soiled jeans. His hands and fingernails were dirty. He was about 6 feet 3 inches and weighed about 270 pounds. This truck driver knew that the little boy was left alone all of the time. One night, the little boy was playing with his dog in the living room. The truck driver broke into the home and escorted both the dog and the boy and left their bodies for the boy's mother to discover. This dream alerted me that not only can kids get hurt really bad, but pets are very vulnerable to being victimized in ways you would never think to know. This knowledge also opened me up to the fact that some so-called anthropologists or traveling veterinarians that go to other countries to work on animal abuse animals. There are things that people do animals and they have them as pets. Truthfully, some of them are actually being abused or put in situations that goes against life. This dream is a greater message that children and pets are among some of the most vulnerable populations that we have. Entity in a maze. Dreamed, July 1997. I had a dream I saw a group of kids playing with a Ouija board. After they did this, I quickly ran away from them. I then ran up to this door and walked through it. I then saw a bunch of wind and spiritual books flying around in chaos. I wanted to get away from this room and then saw another door. I opened it, and when I did, I ended up in a large room. I suddenly heard a scary voice calling my name. It sounded like some sort of EMP or gargoyle. It called, "Mooniki, Mooniki, Mooniki." It was taunting me. When I saw what it was an oversized non-human man. He was very, very fat, with a bald head and large sausage fingers. He wasn't human. As a matter of fact, years later, I heard that people have seen this same creature in their dreams. When I looked at him, he was smiling and laughing. He then points, and I saw a young white man around the age of 25. He had dark hair and was a sort of thin and tall. The man was on puppet strings. He looked lifeless. This creature pointed again, and he caused the man to be flung up in the air, and he crashed his body down the ground. He then showed how he could move, the man on puppet strings. The man's eyes looked vacant, like he had no life inside of him. I wasn't sure if he did. This scared me, but then I began fearlessly praying and rebuking this creature. I called in my parents in the dream, and the three of us began praying and trying to banish the creature. However, the creature was very powerful. Then I saw another door and opened it. This time I saw a giant maze. Within the maze, there was actually no way out. In every exit point, the creature was there as if he had duplicates of himself. The illusion was that if you went through the maze, that you could get out of it. I saw a group of young people walking through the maze, but they couldn't get out. I then saw different groups of people walking through the maze, and they too could not get out. I was also frightened for these people because the creature was waiting to devour them once they got close the exit ways. A choir appeared in my dream and told me the only way to get away from this creator was to sing songs about God and songs that were uplifting. That was the only to break the spell. So, I began singing with the choir. There were about 6 to 7 people in the choir. I could tell they were not human, and they had supernatural abilities. Once we sang for a while, it ended up creating a portal that I could get through in order to get away from the creature. I then ended up on this escalator in the clouds. Once I got to the top of the escalator, I saw a giant mirror. When I looked at my reflection, I saw 3 beings that wore gold and that had gold armor. One of them was praying. The other one had a shield, and the other had a sword. They moved around in a triangular motion. I felt very protected, and then I woke up. I knew from this dream that there were forces that is a work to make humans feel lost and that send us in circles. It feels that there is no way out and that we are trapped. There are also unseen forces that take possession of people's bodies and that they completely lose themselves. Some unfortunate souls actually die in the state. Others experience possession, and they are comatose in this state for the rest of their lives. In order to break through this spell, music is a key component to help people. The mind is like a disc, constantly recording information. Music can rewrite bad programming that is stored within our subconscious mind. Music can heal us and set us free from this bondage. The wrong type of music, however, can lead us into a maze of no, return, or can cause sleep paralysis or possession. The fact that I also dreamed about kids playing with Ouija boards also signifies the fact that they end up opening portals that they can't control and that can ultimately define their fate. The spiritual books flying around denoted spirits and chaos. Perhaps the man on the puppet strings and the young people in the dream had to do with the kids playing with the Ouija board. In today's time, there are more and more people that play with the Ouija boards, and that it never ends well. The entities in the clouds experienced June 2000. While flying to Atlanta, Georgia, I was on my way to see a man that truly wasn't good for me. In fact, I had a vision of him before we met. I woke up out of vision dream about a man that was walking in a park and had on sports clothing. I remember that he wasn't my type in the dream. It was like my mind was trying to warn me about him. A few days later, I visited a friend of mine that lived in Atlanta. She introduced me to this group that focused on Orisha in their spirituality at Morehouse, Clark, and Spelman University. I met the leader of the Orisha group, who was this charismatic man who looked identical to the man in my dream. He was the Babalu priest, and everyone pretty much worshipped the ground he walked on. I could tell he was attracted to me, and this made me feel so special. This also upset a lot of people in the group, especially when he invited me on a coveted trip to Florida that people waited years to get invited to. It was based on spiritual progress and graduation from certain spiritual lessons. I was young and naive and didn't realize the trouble that was brewing, particularly with this man. The women were very upset with me that were on the trip and refused to speak to me. I was mistreated, but now I can understand why they were upset. They felt I didn't deserve to be there. The men were kinder to me, and some were even interested in dating me. However, I was so into my relationship with Babalu that I wasn't interested in talking to anyone else. To make a long story short, I started dating this man and began taking trips to Atlanta. I remember my mother warning me that there was something bad about this man. I also had a dream that I was driving a car and the windows fogged up and I couldn't see. Another time, and one of my last times, I was supposed to be flying to Atlanta, Georgia. I had a really bad feeling about going on this trip. However, I was pretty stubborn and did what I wanted to do. I was thirsty for love and attention and felt that I was finally getting it from the Babalu priest. While flying in the clouds during the airplane trip, I sat close to the window. I began to see dark objects appear, and then they began to take form in the clouds. I thought I was seeing things, but realized what I was seeing was real and a message for me. The beings looked like evil non-human entities. They were very tall. There were so many of them, and each were doing different things related to devising a plan. The first plan I saw was a group of the beings looking at some type of scroll. One of them was pointing at something, and they were trying to figure out the next steps. The other group was talking to each other as if they were creating some type of plan. I then saw a giant being. He was very scary looking and had 2 horns. He was sitting down with his legs crossed and his arm on his chin. He looked upset about something. I couldn't help but wonder if this was about me and my trip to Atlanta. I felt that these beings scheming for my downfall. When I saw these images, they weren't moving around, they were more like still images, but they were crystal clear as far as I could see. I even sketched them out. When I arrived in Atlanta, Georgia, the man that I thought really loved me tells me he is bisexual, basically, and that he doesn't see anything wrong with two men being together, or two women being together. I also knew by the way he was intimate that something was off about him. No, I've never done anal, but I could tell he had some confusion about things. I also didn't like how his breath smelled. It smelled so terrible that it all made a lot of sense to me. The day I was going to leave to go back to Michigan, one of the guys in the group said he was headed in the same direction and that I could drive back with him instead of flying. On our way out of the driveway to his house, this car whips out of nowhere, driving extremely fast down the street and crashes into my friend's car. I felt a huge jolt. The back passenger seat was damaged. I started to sit in the back seat for the ride because there were some things I was going to work on and needed room. But I decided to sit in the passenger seat. Had I not moved to the passenger seat, there is a chance I could have gotten pretty injured or worse. This accidentally significantly delayed our trip back because the car was damaged. The Babalu I was seeing at the time came over to my friend's house and did an oracle reading. He said that the accident was intended for me, and that if I'm not careful, it would cost me my life. After this accident, I decided that this man really wasn't into me, and that he really didn't have his self together. I also questioned his credibility for him to give me a death warning when his risky lifestyle would invite death to himself and others. More importantly, I refused to date a bisexual man, especially in Atlanta, which was dangerous in so many ways. After I ended our relationship, I would have more problems to follow. After that, I will not disclose. I learned from seeing the images in the clouds that it was revealed to me that these entities were trying to set me up, and it didn't work as planned to the degree they wanted it. I was so thankful this was revealed to me, and it made me aware of the spiritual dangers that lurk in the shadows.